All right. Hello, everyone. I am Chandler, and today I am going to do a presentation for y'all on physical activity and obesity with my partner, Jackson. All righty. Well, let's just go ahead and get into it. If I can work. All right, there we go. All right. First off, the magnitude of the problem. Um, Obesity in the United States has been increasing over the last few decades. Um, 67% of adults and 32% of youths in the United States are overweight. The prevalence of obesity nearly tripled the past 20 years to 34% in adults and 17% in youths. So that's pretty substantial. The economic burden of obesity is $147 billion a year, which is nearly 10% of the national healthcare budget. This makes the medical costs for people who have obesity $1,429 higher than those of normal weight. The US has the highest BMI of high income countries. Obesity, though, is not just a problem in the US, but it is also a problem globally. Globally, according to the WHO, 1.6 billion people aged 15 or older were overweight in 2005. 400 million were obese, and about 20 million children under the age of 5 years were overweight. Overweight and obesity have also emerged as problems in low and middle income nations, particularly in urban areas. So it is not just a high income country problem. Right. Treatment of overweight and obesity. Physical activity is a clinically accepted approach to weight loss. All adults can gain this health benefit of physical activity. And yeah, just be patient with your weight loss. Going off the first bullet point, physical activity is a clinically accepted approach to weight loss. So are low calorie diets and lower fat diets, behavior therapy, pharmacotherapy, surgery, and a combination of these techniques. All adults, like I said, can gain this health benefit of physical activity no matter their age, sex, race, or ethnicity. Physically active people with all body weights, as in normal weight, overweight, obesity, also have lower risk of all-cause mortality than do inactive people, which I found very interesting. And for most people who are overweight, the initial goal for weight loss is around 10% of weight over a 6-month period of time. If someone's BMI is in the range of 27 to 35, this goal could be achieved with a decrease of 300 to 500 calories per day. So I thought that was pretty manageable. This can result in about a half pound to a pound weight loss per week, which is pretty much like the standard healthy amount to lose per week if you're trying to lose weight. For people with BMIs over 35, deficits of 500 to 1,000 calories per day are required in order to achieve this goal. Usually, after 6 months of weight loss, people start reaching a plateau because of the reduction of basal metabolic rate that results from the lower body mass. Keep in mind that lost weight is usually regained unless a weight maintenance program consisting of dietary therapy, physical activity, and behavior therapy is continued indefinitely. After 6 months of successful weight loss, efforts to maintain weight loss should be undertaken. This is where diet and physical activity come into play. Alrighty. And this right here is my first peer review article I want to present to you guys. And as y'all can see at the top, the title of this peer review article is Treatment for Overweight and Obesity in Adult Populations, a systemic review and meta-analysis. First off, starting with the background, in response to obesity being a major public health issue, this review highlights behavioral and pharmacologic treatments for adults who are overweight and or obese. For methods in this review, they pooled together results and outcomes from multiple studies regarding diet, exercise, lifestyle, and medicine's impact on weight loss in overweight or obese adults. Overall, 68 studies were eligible for inclusion in this paper. Data were extracted and pooled wherever possible for 5 weight outcomes, 6 secondary health outcomes, and 4 adverse event categories. And onto the results section. As it pertains to physical activity's effect on obesity, diet alone beat out physical activity for showing greatest reduction in weight. The test for subgroup differences based on type of behavioral intervention and the behavioral trials, which were diet and exercise, and lifestyle, was significant. Interventions using exercise alone did not lead to significantly greater reductions in weight, whereas diet alone showed the largest difference between groups. To conclude the study, all things considered, weight loss in obese and overweight individuals was shown to have substantial health benefits. This includes less incidence in type 2 diabetes and heart disease. Future research should include longer-term follow-up to observe maintenance of weight loss, to study the effects of repeated weight loss and regain, and to determine if improvements in health outcomes are related to the intervention apart from weight loss. And I actually found a few studies. I have one later on that kind of had the same similar results. That diet has more of a bearing on weight loss than physical activity, which I found interesting, but kind of made sense because, yeah, you don't want to be eating an excess amount of calories or increased energy intake when you want to lose weight. And on to our next slide. Assessing and defining overweight and obesity. There are a few different ways which are listed. Body mass index, otherwise known as BMI, waist circumference, and waist to hip ratio. Starting out with BMI, Quatelet's body mass index and relative weight are typically used to estimate overweight and obesity in epidemiological studies because they are easy to assess in a large number of subjects. Relative weight is calculated by dividing body weight by the midpoint of desirable weight for a person judged to have a medium frame. Body mass index, BMI, is a person's weight in kilograms divided by the square of height in meters. The NIH defined people as overweight when BMI is in the range of 25 to 29.9 kilograms over meters squared, and as obese when BMI equals or exceeds 30 kilograms over meters squared. Moving on to waist circumference. Measuring your waist circumference can be another way to estimate your disease risk because it is positively correlated with abdominal fat content. Excessive abdominal fat may be serious because it places you at a greater risk for developing obesity-related conditions such as type 2 diabetes, high blood pressure, and coronary artery disease. you have a higher risk of developing obesity-related conditions if you are over 40 inches waist circumference for a man and over 35 inches waist circumference for a non-pregnant woman. Waist circumference can be used as a screening tool, but it is not diagnostic of the body fatness or health of an individual. On to the next one, waist to hip ratio. Waist to hip ratio predicts the pattern of visceral fat. Excess fat above the waist, called androidal fat, increases risk for CHD more than does excess fat below the waist, called gynoidal or gynoidal fat. The American Heart Association suggests that the desirable waist to hip ratio is less than 1.00 for men and less than 0.80 for women. And right here on this slide, I put a BMI chart, basically letting you tell what range your BMI lands in, depending on your height and your weight. You could either go from use pounds or kilograms, or meters or inches or feet and inches, whatever you feel comfortable with. But yeah, just wanted to include that for y'all as a visual. All right, on to our next slide. Physical activity and physical fitness. What's the difference of how it pertains to the health risk of obesity? So basically, physical fitness versus physical activity. What is the difference? All right. So physical fitness, the results from studies of physical fitness differ somewhat from those relating to physical activity. Studies of physical fitness generally have observed that being fit can remove the excess risk of all-cause or cardiovascular mortality associated with being overweight or obese. And physical activity, in contrast, studies of physical activity generally have shown that each risk factor, as in inactivity or overweight slash obesity, is associated with increased risk of all-cause mortality or cardiovascular disease of approximately equal magnitude, and that being physically active does not remove the excess risk associated with increased adiposity. One way to look at it that helped me is the term lack of fitness and the term inactivity. Those two terms do not represent identical characteristics, and physical fitness tends to be more precisely measured than physical activity. Just wanted to share that with you all because I know that helped me a little bit understand it a little bit better. All right, on to the next slide. Physical activity and prevention of excess weight gain, the evidence. An active lifestyle is known to prevent weight gain, as y'all may know. More physical activity increases the number of calories you burn. The burning of calories through physical activity combined with reducing the number of calories in your diet creates a calorie deficit that results in weight loss and prevention of weight gain. Most weight loss occurs because of decreased caloric intake. However, evidence shows that the only way to maintain weight loss is to be engaged in regular physical activity. Most importantly, physical activity reduces the risk of cardiovascular disease and diabetes beyond that produced by weight reduction alone. One review written about a few different prospective cohort studies in our textbook on this topic stood out to me, and I just wanted to share it with y'all. And this review of 11 prospective cohort studies concluded that physical activity or increased fitness measured by maximal treadmill endurance is associated with minimizing weight gain or with a reduction in the risk of large weight gains, about 5 to 10 kilograms among adults over periods ranging from 2 to 10 years. More recently, the Scientific Advisory Committee for the Physical Activity Guidelines for Americans located 9 prospective cohort studies published since 1995, with follow-ups of at least 1 year to more than 6 years, that showed an inverse association between physical activity and a body weight outcome. The committee concluded that the optimal amount of physical activity needed for weight maintenance over the long term is unclear, but that many people may need more than 150 minutes of moderate intensity activity each week to maintain their weight at a stable level. I found this interesting just because I feel like most health or exercise professionals and exercise physiologists will say 150 minutes is basically just the baseline of like how many minutes of exercise you should be doing a week to maintain a stable level of weight. But this study found that different people may need um, more minutes of activity a week. It just depends. So I just wanted to share that with y'all. Just something that stood out to me. All right. And for our next slide, I just wanted to include this. I found this on a dietary guidelines that the government put out. But it's basically just a chart, calories used per hour in common physical activities. I just found a few of the numbers interesting. Like in golf, you could burn up to 330 calories an hour. I never played golf, but I just found that number higher than I expected. So I thought that was cool. And a few of these other numbers on here I found interesting, but you guys are welcome to go over this. And yeah, see what you might find interesting if anything stands out to y'all. Alrighty. And this is the last study that I posted for my part of the presentation. Let's start off with the background. The theory. Let's start off with the title. The role of physical activity and exercise in obesity and weight management, time for critical appraisal. All right, now background. The theory of low physical activity as the cause of obesity is examined. Additionally, the role of physical activity in food intake and weight control is appraised. However, since voluntary exercise is the most important discretionary component of total daily energy expenditure, it can affect energy balance. Therefore, physical activity and exercise hold potential as part of the solution for the ongoing obesity epidemic. This is a major public health concern because obesity has far-reaching negative effects on health. The risk of type 2 diabetes, cardiovascular disease, and certain types of cancers and even mortality are directly proportional to the degree of obesity. Thus, it goes without saying that there is a need to reverse this modern epidemic. And then going on to methods in this peer review to assess the theory that less energy expenditure equates to weight gain, and further along the line, obesity, we look at patterns and trends in different countries of their physical activity and their average calorie intake to further assess what might be the cause of the obesity epidemic. Going on to results. I thought the results for this review were rather interesting, basically saying an increase in energy intake over the years is more likely the cause of an increase in population's body weight compared to a decline in physical activity. Population energy intake can be assessed from the National Food Availability Data. These data show the daily energy intake in the US increased slowly until the early 1980s, and then started to increase rapidly. Moreover, a recent global analysis concluded that increases in food energy supplies are sufficient to explain increases in average population body weight, particularly in high-income countries. Thus, it seems unlikely that decrements in daily energy expenditure are driving the ongoing obesity epidemic. I found this interesting. This is another article basically saying that your energy intake, your diet, if you're eating in excess, that is more likely to affect your weight rather than lack of physical activity. In conclusion, although a decline in physical activity and exercise may not be the cause of the obesity epidemic, it may be part of the solution in order to create that energy deficit needed because of the increased energy expenditure. So physical activity is more looks like as a part of the solution and not as a part of what causes obesity in the first place. So yeah, that was another article that stood out to me. And that actually concludes my portion of the presentation. My partner Jackson is going to take the reins from here. Thank you guys for coming on this slideshow journey with me. But yeah, I'll talk to y'all later.
All right. Hello, everybody. My name's Jackson. I'll be taking over the rest of this presentation on physical activity and obesity. So this first section that I'll talk about is physical activity and weight loss and the evidence behind this correlation with physical activity resulting in weight loss. So there was this study, the Weight Cycling Aerobic Center Longitudinal Study, or the ACLS. The evidence from this study suggested that physical activity or fitness can offset some of the risk of weight fluctuation or just having an unhealthy diet. The study showed that both men and women were found to have slightly lower measurements of initial weight and weight gain related to having greater increases in measured endurance after each of their clinical trials. So they would come in at their clinical trials at set points throughout this study. And then as they increased their endurance at varying levels, so increased minutes on the weight cycle, that would correlate to having lower measurements at each of those times during the trial. And so this just shows that regular physical activity can help offset these weight fluctuations, loss of non-fat body mass as well, and the subsequent health risk of restrictive yo-yo dieting. So yo-yo dieting is that kind of up and down flow of gaining weight, losing weight, gaining weight again, losing weight again. So kind of helps to offset that risk. So I'll talk about the exercise training studies. The textbook talked about a few, but I'll focus on two of them. So this first section was the exercise only studies. So there was the Midwest exercise trial that we'll dive into a little bit. This was a 16th month randomized control trial, tested whether supervised moderate intensity exercise without dieting was effective for losing weight or just preventing weight gain in young adults who were overweight. So BMI of 25 to less than 35. And they were also sedentary. The results showed that exercise prevented weight gain in women and produced weight loss in men. We'll look at a figure after this, but it shows that men who exercise had reductions in their weight, BMI, fat mass, compared to the control group. And then the women who exercised maintained their initial weight, BMI, and fat mass, while controls actually increased. Notice increases in their weight, BMI, and fat mass. This is that figure for the Midwest exercise trial. So let me get out my pointer real quick so you can kind of see. You notice about the same weight here for the men, but a greater decrease here for the group that exercised. And then women, a slight increase here in that control group, but maintain that level of their weight after in the exercise group. And the body fat percentage shows this decrease for the exercise group in women, while an increase is there, and then a greater decrease here for that exercise group for men. All right, and then the next type of studies that were performed included diet on top of exercise. So one of them that the textbook presented was the Women's Healthy Lifestyle Project. So this was a 5-year randomized controlled trial of a dietary and physical activity lifestyle intervention. It enrolled 535 healthy premenopausal women, so 44 to 50 years of age. And of those 535 participants, 509 actually finished the trial. The results showed that BMI averaged 25 at the beginning of the study, an increase of 26 in the control group, but did not change in the intervention group. However, it did, the body fat percentage that was measured showed slight decreases in the physical activity group, while it increased in the control group. And also waist circumference decreased more in the intervention group compared to the control group. And this is a graph showing that data. So down at the bottom, you can see Women's Healthy Lifestyle Project showed that increased physical activity and decreased calorie intake prevented 5-year weight gain in perimenopausal women. And this kind of associates the idea of diet and exercise to what exercise does to our appetite. So our brain senses blood levels of glucose and insulin, regulates hunger between meals that way. So low glucose stimulates appetite, while high levels of glucose and insulin inhibit your appetite. Exercise lowers insulin and glucose levels, so that could affect your appetite. Down here it says exercise training programs that allow people who are overweight to eat as they wish frequently lead to fat loss in men, but not women, possibly because of sex differences in the way energy regulating hormones and appetite respond to increased energy expenditure. And this kind of presents this idea of the greatest amount of weight loss that has been found in different interventions, which is restricting your caloric intake while also increasing your physical activity. So basically, the greater that your energy expenditure is compared to your caloric intake, you're going to have decreases in the amount of calories that you're taking in. But the American Dietetic Association concluded that weight loss studies shown only small reductions in body weight with physical activity treatment compared to no treatment control groups. This likely reflects the fact that energy deficits that can be induced through physical activity alone are relatively small. However, the amount of weight loss with physical activity is additive to the loss that follows a reduction in calorie intake with a diet. It's that idea of the energy expenditure being greater than the intake. There's a consensus that an exercise program cannot prevent some loss of fat-free mass during substantial weight loss, even when caloric intake remains the same as it was prior to the beginning of the exercise program. Exercise can lead to a small gain in fat-free mass as body fat is reduced. This occurs when body weight does not change during the exercise program. So people who desire to increase or maintain their fat-free mass during an exercise program must have a diet of sufficient calories to balance out that increased energy expenditure. So that way you can burn off your fat mass, but also try and keep on that fat-free mass. In this next section, I'm going to talk about physical activity and weight maintenance. So being able to lose weight and then keep it off. So lost body weight is usually regained when diets are used alone, but diet combined with increased exercise seems to yield better maintenance of weight loss, especially if the exercise program is maintained after the dieting ends. So many correlation studies show a strong association between physical activity at follow-up and maintenance of weight loss. So many systematic reviews have been performed for RCTs for diet plus exercise interventions, and differences were small in each study, but when the studies were averaged together, diet plus exercise resulted in 20% greater initial weight loss than just dieting alone, and then 20% greater sustained weight loss after 1 year than just dieting alone as well. So nonetheless, it shows that a lot of people, not just this, but in general, lots of people tend to regain their initial weight loss after just 1 year of ending a weight loss intervention, just because they don't maintain the exercise, you're going to regain that weight. And with that, we can kind of notice here, I'll get on my pointer again real quick. So you notice we have different groups here increasing. So the intervention, 0 weeks to 8 weeks. At the end of that exercise intervention, you notice our exercise group here, and then diet and exercise is going to be able to maintain or even increase their weight loss there up to that 8-month and then 18-month point. But those that dropped out of their exercise once the intervention was over, stopped doing the exercise plan, decreased strongly down to 8 months and then 18 months to regain that weight. But also just diet alone was in that same section of regaining weight over 8 months and then 18 months as well. So the strength of this association, so 20 short-term studies lasting 4 months or less increased energy expenditure by an average of 2,200 kilocalories a week and reported mean reductions in body weight about 0.18 kilograms per week and fat weight of 0.21 kilograms per week. 11 long-term studies lasting 6.5 months or more increased energy expenditure by an average of 1,100 kilocalories per week and reported mean reductions in body weight of 0.06 kilograms per week and fat weight of 0.06 kilograms per week as well. Kind of notice that correlation, how almost exponentially decreasing there or increasing which way you go from 1100 to 2200 for that reduction in body weight and fat weight. On average, though, physical activity that expends 13 to 26 kilocalories per kilogram per week, which is about 180 minutes of moderate exercise or 115 of vigorous exercise, will lead to a small weight loss, which is about 1 to 3% of your body weight. And then for dose response, so fat loss is proportional to the amount of energy expenditure in short-term exercise studies, but not long-term studies. The weight loss during short-term studies is about 85% of what would be predicted based on energy expenditure, assuming a controlled diet. In contrast, though, weight loss is only about 30% of that expected in long-term studies, suggesting a poor adherence by the participants, to either the prescribed physical activity or prescribed diet. So the AACSM concluded that there's a dose response that is effective between about 2.5 to 4.5 hours of moderate intensity exercise. It's about 55 to 69% of maximal heart rate, or about 3 to 6 mets, depending on your age. That results in an energy expenditure of at least 1,200 to 2,000 kilocalories per week. That amount of activity combined with reduced caloric intake of 1,000 to 1,500 kilocalories per week will yield healthful weight loss of about 1 to 2 pounds per week. So that's the ACSM's recommendation to achieve a weight loss. And then I was responsible for looking up a randomized control trial. So this was an article that I found titled Objective Physical Activity and Weight Loss in Adults, the Step Up Randomized Control Clinical Trial. So the objective of this RCT was to examine the amount of objectively measured moderate to vigorous physical activity and light physical activity that is associated with long-term weight loss and the maintenance of clinically significant weight loss. So the methods, they had adults participating in an 18-month behavioral weight loss intervention, and they were prescribed a low-calorie diet and increased physical activity as well. So change in weight and objectively measured physical activity were assessed. So they were split into different groups. So they had an MVPA, so that moderate to vigorous physical activity group, greater than 10. So they would participate in bouts of exercise that were greater than 3 METs for greater than 10 minutes at a time. And then there was another group that was less than 10. So that'd be bouts that were less than 10 minutes in duration that were greater than 3 METs. And then a light physical activity group was computed from bouts, between that idea that we've learned of 1.5 to less than 3 METs. This study showed that when grouped on percent weight loss at 18 months at the end of the trial, there was a significant group time interaction effect for both the MVPA greater than 10 and light physical activity, with both measures being significantly greater at 18 months in those with greater than 10% weight loss. Similar results were observed for MVPA greater than 10 and LPA, with participants grouped on achieving greater than 10% weight loss at 6 months and sustaining this at 18 months. MVPA greater than 10 of 200 to 300 minutes per week, coupled with increased amounts of light physical activity, are associated with improved long-term weight loss. Interventions should promote engagement in these amounts and types of physical activity. So this was a table that was presented within this trial. So you notice we have a weight gain group, so they were just kind of the control trial, gaining weight steadily over that time. This is in 3-month intervals, so at the end of that 6 months, that was a lot. Where that study talked about how the group that was greater than 10% weight loss was able to greater or more greatly increase their weight loss as well, but also maintain that. So you can kind of see it's down here at 6 months, still decreasing or at least losing weight, and then be able to maintain that through the 18 months compared to other groups that were down here at the 6-month group, kind of increasing over all of those areas. And then here are some of our references. I'll leave these in here just so y'all can see that we actually did some research. All right, and that's going to conclude our lecture presentation on physical activity and obesity. So thanks for coming, y'all. Have a great day.